Have you ever heard of a town where every single person vanished practically in an instant? I'm not talking over weeks or days. I'm talking overnight. They left behind simmering pots of food, books open and waiting, and homes that were still warm. No note, no sign of a struggle, and zero explanation. This is the story of a place seemingly erased from the map, a mystery that has stumped investigators and storytellers for nearly a century. It's a tale that makes you question how solid the world around us really is, and forces you to wonder if an entire community can just cease to be. Our story starts in the unforgiving, beautiful wilderness of northern Canada, near the shores of Lake Anjikuni. This is a land of endless tundra, winds that can carve stone, and a silence so deep it feels like a physical presence. Here, in the early 20th century, lived a small Inuit community. These people weren't just residents of this land, they were a part of it. Their lives were shaped by the seasons, the caribou migrations, and a deep ancestral knowledge that let them thrive in one of the planet's toughest environments. The village itself was a small, tight-knit settlement, just a collection of tents and huts. It was a tiny blip of life and warmth in a vast, frozen landscape. The people there were known to be friendly to the few outsiders who braved the journey, like the fur trappers who would pass through to trade goods and stories. For generations, life followed a steady, predictable rhythm. The men hunted and fished, the women prepared food and clothing, and the children played under the pale northern sun. It was a life of hardship, for sure, but also one of deep community. As the winter of 1930 began to tighten its grip on the Northwest Territories, the village by Lake Anjukuni prepared just like it always had. Food was being stored, furs were being readied, and the community braced for the long, dark months ahead. There was absolutely no sign that this year would be any different. No warning at all that this community was about to become the heart of one of Canada's most enduring and terrifying mysteries. The man who walks into this mystery is a French-Canadian fur trapper named Joe Labelle. By all accounts, he was a seasoned frontiersman who knew the region well and knew the Anjukuni village as a welcoming stop. In November of 1930, exhausted and cold, he headed for the familiar settlement, expecting the usual comfort of wood smoke on the air, the barking of sled dogs, and the warm greetings of the villagers. But as he got closer, an awful feeling started to creep in. The air was still, too still. There was no smoke, no laughter, no dogs. There was only a profound and chilling silence. He called out. The only answer he got was the wind whispering across the snow. Cautiously, he walked into the village, and what he saw would haunt him for the rest of his life. The entire place was deserted, and it wasn't just empty, it was frozen in time. In one tent, he found a pot of stew, now a solid block of ice, still hanging over the ashes of a fire pit. The meal had clearly been abandoned mid-preparation. In another shelter, he found a child's sealskin coat, half-mended. A bone needle, still threaded, was stuck right in the fabric, as if the person sewing had just set it down for a moment. Everywhere he looked, it was the same story. Rifles, absolutely essential for survival, were found leaning against the walls of the tents. Food, warm clothes, and personal belongings were all left behind. This wasn't a group of people who had packed up and moved. This looked like a community that was in the middle of their daily routines when something interrupted them. A community that fully expected to come right back. Then, Labelle found the one thing that turned the scene from strange to truly horrifying. The sled dogs. A team of 7 of them, still tethered, lay dead. They had starved to death. This single detail was a shrieking alarm in the silence. For the Inuit, sled dogs weren't just animals. They were a lifeline, essential partners for survival. Abandoning them was unthinkable. Letting them starve when there was food in the village defied all logic and tradition. It suggested that whatever happened here happened so suddenly that not a single person was left to do something as simple as untie a dog. Shaken, Labelle kept searching, his dread growing with every step. The final, and maybe most disturbing discovery, was at the edge of the village. The community's ancestral burial ground, a sacred place, had been disturbed. Graves had reportedly been opened and were now empty. It was a desecration that made no sense. This wasn't just an empty village. This was a place where the living, the dead, and the very laws of nature seemed to have been erased. Heart-pounding, Labelle fled the silent village and made for the nearest telegraph office to alert the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. When Joe Labelle's frantic message reached the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP, it must have sounded like the ravings of a man who'd spent too much time alone in the wilderness. An entire village vanished? The story was unbelievable, but Labelle's report was so urgent they couldn't ignore it, and the Mounties had to investigate. When a detachment of officers finally made the difficult journey to Lake Anjikuni, they found the scene exactly as Labelle had described it. The empty tents, the abandoned meals, the tools left mid-task, and most chillingly, the frozen bodies of the sled dogs, a silent testament to a sudden and complete departure. The officers, men who were used to the harsh realities of the North, were reportedly baffled. Their investigation began, but it was an investigation into a total void. They scoured the area for any clue, any track, any sign that could explain where 30 men, women, and children could have possibly gone. They found nothing. There were no footprints in the snow leading away from the village, which was especially weird. A mass exodus, even a panicked one, should have left a chaos of tracks. But there was only the undisturbed snow, suggesting the disappearance either happened before the last snowfall or that the villagers left without touching the ground. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no discarded weapons, no hint of a raid or an animal attack. The RCMP considered every possibility. Could a sudden, localized blizzard have caught them all? Unlikely. An entire community of experienced Inuit who knew the weather better than anyone wouldn't be caught so completely off guard. Besides, a storm doesn't explain the open graves. Could they have just decided to migrate somewhere else? That theory was quickly thrown out. No one migrating would leave behind their rifles, their warm clothes, and their food. And they would never, under any circumstances, abandon their dogs to starve. The official investigation slammed into a wall of absolute nothingness. No bodies, no clues, no motives, and no answers. It was as if the fabric of reality had torn open, swallowed the entire village, and then sealed itself back up without a scar. As the story started to leak out, with more sensational details attaching themselves to the tale, other trappers in the region reportedly came forward with their own strange stories. They spoke of seeing a bizarre, cylindrical object in the sky that seemed to be heading toward the Anjukuni area. Others reported seeing strange, pulsing blue lights hovering over the lake. These accounts, impossible to verify, added a new, otherworldly layer to the mystery. The case was a complete dead end. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police were left with a file filled only with questions. A village had existed, its people were known, and then they were not. With no evidence and no leads, the official investigation just stopped. The file on the lost village of Anjukuni was left open, unsolved. A silent monument to an impossible event. The official investigation might have hit a brick wall, but that's where the real story of Anjukuni begins. For almost 100 years, the fate of those villagers has been a source of intense speculation. The sheer impossibility of it all has made it the perfect canvas for our wildest theories and deepest fears. So, what could possibly explain it? Before we dive into the theories, from the logical to the truly out there, I want to hear from you. Based on what you've heard so far, what's your gut reaction? What do you think happened to the lost villagers of Lake Anjikuni? Let me know your initial thoughts in the comments. It's a mystery that belongs to all of us now, and every voice adds another piece to the puzzle. When you're staring at a complete lack of evidence, human nature can't help but try to fill in the blanks, and into the void left by the Anjukuni disappearance, a whole host of theories has rushed in. Let's start with the most down-to-earth explanations. The first is that the villagers simply left. Maybe some critical event, a terrible famine, a bad spiritual omen, or a devastating disease forced the entire community to make a desperate migration. they would have traveled light in a last-ditch effort to find a new home. This could explain the empty village, but it completely fails to account for the weird details. Why leave behind rifles and warm clothing? Why the half-finished chores? And most importantly, it offers no explanation for the starved dogs, an act that goes against everything we know about Inuit culture and survival. Another mundane, though tragic, theory is a massive environmental disaster. Could the entire community have been on the frozen lake when the ice gave way, plunging them all into the frigid water? This would explain the lack of bodies and how sudden it was, but it seems highly unlikely. It would mean every single man, woman, and child was on the ice at the exact same moment, and an event that big would have likely left some evidence. Broken ice, floating debris, something, and again, it doesn't explain the disturbed graves on the shore. This is where the explanations start to wander off the beaten path. What if they didn't leave by choice? What if they were taken? This leads us to foul play. Perhaps they were ambushed by a rival group, but the RCMP found no signs of a struggle. A violent fight involving 30 people would have left a mess. Blood, signs of battle, something. The village was unnervingly clean. With logical explanations failing to fit the story, people began to look for answers in more unusual places. The region around Anjukuni is steeped in ancient folklore, full of stories of powerful and sometimes malevolent spirits. Some have suggested the village fell victim to one of these entities. An old Inuit legend tells of a terrifying spirit of winter and starvation. Could the villagers have fled in terror from something they believed was a supernatural threat, only to get lost and perish in the wilderness? It's a theory, rooted in the culture of the place, but one that's impossible to prove. And then there's the theory that has come to dominate the Anjukuni legend today. Alien abduction. When the story was resurrected by paranormal authors decades later, those strange lights seen by other trappers became a central focus. To some, the idea of a silent craft descending over the village and taking everyone was the only explanation that fit all the bizarre details. The suddenness, the lack of tracks, the way an entire community simply vanished. It all aligns perfectly with classic UFO lore. It positions Anjukuni as a kind of first contact event gone wrong, one of the earliest and most complete mass abductions in history. But as with so many great mysteries, the story we've been told might not be the real story at all. To figure out what really happened at Lake Anjikuni, we have to become detectives, not of a crime, but of a story. We have to trace it back to its source. The tale first exploded into the public consciousness through an article written by a journalist named Emmett Kelleher in late 1930. And right from the start, there were problems. Skeptical investigators, like Brian Dunning from the Skeptoid podcast, have pointed out huge red flags in the original account. For instance, some versions of the legend mention kayaks being battered by waves, a detail that makes zero sense in November, when the lake would have been a solid sheet of ice. Over the years, as the story was retold by various authors, it grew. The small camp of about 25 people in Kelleher's original article ballooned into a bustling town of hundreds, sometimes even thousands. A single disturbed grave morphed into an entire desecrated cemetery. The story was getting more dramatic, more terrifying, and less factual with each retelling. The most damning evidence against the legend, though, comes from the very organization at its heart, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. While the legend claims the RCMP launched a massive investigation, their modern-day stance is crystal clear. They have no official record of the Anjukuni disappearance. No report from a Joe Labelle, no massive search party. In fact, internal RCMP documents show they looked into Emmett Kelleher's newspaper story shortly after it was published and dismissed it as a fabrication back in 1931. An RCMP sergeant who investigated the story's origins concluded it was a hoax, noting that Kelleher had a reputation for embellishment and that the photo used in the original article was just an old stock image from the RCMP's own archives. The RCMP also noted that a permanent village of that size was highly unlikely to exist in such a remote area at the time. The Inuit of the region were largely nomadic, moving between seasonal camps. The most probable real event at the core of this legend is incredibly mundane. A trapper, maybe even Joe Labelle, stumbled upon a temporarily abandoned seasonal camp. He either misinterpreted the scene, or, more likely, spun a tall tale for a journalist who was hungry for a sensational story. So, the village of Anjukuni likely never vanished, because, in all probability, it never existed in the way the legend describes. But that doesn't make the story any less powerful. In fact, it makes it more fascinating. It forces us to ask why. Why do we want to believe in tales of vanishing towns? The Anjukuni legend isn't alone. That theme of a place being suddenly wiped off the map really resonates with us. It taps into a primal fear of the unknown and a nagging sense that the world we know isn't as stable as it seems. Take the case of Fossa, a medieval town in Italy. On the 6th of April 2009, a devastating earthquake struck the region in the middle of the night. The town's residents fled for their lives, leaving everything. For years, Fossa was a literal ghost town, a red zone, too dangerous to enter. Explorers found scenes eerily similar to the Anjukuni legend, homes with possessions still in place, tables set for meals that were never eaten, a place frozen at the moment of disaster. But in Fossa, there's no mystery. We know what happened. It was a tragedy, explained by seismology. It shows us what a real overnight disappearance looks like. It's sudden and terrifying, but it's not inexplicable. In recent years, restoration work has begun, and people are slowly returning, bringing life back to the ghost town. Then you have modern urban legends, like Larkspur Hollow, a supposed town in the Missouri Ozarks that allegedly vanished in 1959. The story claims a traveler found the site wiped clean. No buildings, no roads, not even graves. But despite claims of documented records, no credible evidence supports its existence. It appears to be a work of creative writing, a fictional story that blends bits of real Ozark folklore into a compelling but baseless mystery. These stories, from the likely hoax of Anjukuni to the real tragedy of Fossa to the fictional tale of Larkspur Hollow, all speak to the same fascination. They represent a crack in the surface of our mundane world, a glimpse into a reality where the impossible can happen. In the end, the mystery of Lake Anjikuni isn't about what happened to a lost Inuit community. It's about what happens to a story when it's set loose in the world. The tale of the vanishing village is a piece of modern folklore, a campfire story polished and passed down for nearly a century. The original event was probably nothing more than an empty campsite and an overzealous journalist. But it became something more. It became a legend. The people of Anjukuni may never have vanished because, in the form the legend describes, they may never have been there at all. But the story is very real. And the fact that it has lasted this long tells us more about ourselves than it does about any paranormal event. It reveals our fascination with the vast, empty spaces on the map, and our deep-seated need to fill them with mystery, wonder, and terror. It makes you ask, what is it about the unknown that makes us so ready to believe that anything can happen, and then disappear without a trace? If you have a theory about the Anjukuni legend, or know of another story about a place that vanished, share it in the comments. The conversation is often as fascinating as the mystery itself. And if you want to keep exploring the unexplained, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next journey into the unknown.